You feel like something is wrong in your life, but you don't exactly know what it is. You look around and everything seems right. You have a job, friends, maybe even a family who loves you. But deep down, there's an uncomfortable feeling, an emptiness you can't explain. And the more you try to ignore it, the more it grows like a silent shadow trailing behind you. The problem? This emptiness isn't a flaw in the system. It's there because you've spent your entire life being someone you're not. The truth is brutal. The identity you've built isn't yours. It was shaped by years of expectations, unspoken rules, approving looks, and silent criticism. Since childhood, you learned to fit in, to play roles, to be what others wanted you to be. And now, after so much time, you don't even know where the mask ends and the true self begins. Did you really choose your path, or did you just follow the trail they said was safe? And then comes self-awareness, and it doesn't come to comfort you, but to destroy. It strips away every layer of the false identity you've worn for years. And do you know what's left? Chaos. Because the moment you realize that your choices were made to please others, that your fears were inherited, that your voice was silenced to avoid conflict, in that moment, the ground disappears. You look back and realize that much of what you believed to be true was simply conditioning. And then comes the question that scares you the most. If I'm not who I thought I was, then who am I? Here's where many give up. The process of deconstruction is painful. You'll feel lost, confused, directionless. Your old certainties will crumble. What once defined you, your job, your beliefs, your role in the family, even your name, will start to seem distant, strange, almost irrelevant. You'll want to run away from yourself, seek distractions, dive into anything that keeps you from facing the emptiness. But listen, this emptiness is an invitation. It's not the end. It's the space where your true self can finally emerge. The question is, do you have the courage to continue? Most people don't realize how afraid they are of silence. Not external silence, but the one that happens when all distractions disappear and you're left alone with yourself. It's in that moment that the thoughts you avoid start to surface. The pains you buried rise to the surface. The truths you don't want to admit become impossible to ignore. And then, without realizing it, you turn on the TV, grab your phone, go out to meet someone. Anything to escape this confrontation. But here's the truth no one wants to hear. As long as you keep running from yourself, you'll never be free. Self-awareness isn't about feeling good. It's about stripping away all the lies you've told yourself. You say you're happy in your relationship, but deep down you feel a weight in your chest every time you think about the future. You convince yourself that you like your job, but you wake up with that sense of dread, as if you're serving a sentence. The problem isn't that you don't know what's wrong. The problem is that you do and don't want to admit it. Because admitting it would mean facing the discomfort of change. And change hurts. And then you ask yourself, why is it so hard to look inside? Because inside, there are parts of you that have been rejected, ignored, and repressed. There are memories you'd rather forget, desires you learn to hide, fears you don't want to face. But ignoring them doesn't make them go away, it makes them grow in the dark, controlling your actions without you even realizing. Everything you avoid looking at inside yourself continues to dictate your life, your choices, your failures. And the worst part? You don't even realize you're being controlled by what you hide. You consider yourself a good person, controlled, rational, but every now and then something slips. An outburst of anger, a desire you won't admit, envy that consumes you silently. And then you think, this isn't me. But what if I told you that it's exactly you? Carl Jung called the shadow everything you repress, deny, or hide about yourself. Those impulses you pretend not to have. The aggression you swear doesn't exist. The part of you that wants to scream when everyone expects you to smile. Believe me, what you hide doesn't disappear, It just learns to act in the dark. You think you're in control, but the shadow finds a way to manifest. The anger you don't express turns into a chronic headache. The desire you suppress shows up in your dreams in ways you don't understand. The accumulated frustration explodes at the wrong time, in the wrong place, against the wrong person. Have you ever felt this? A moment when you say something cruel and then ask yourself why you said it? An impulsive decision that seemed to come from someone else? That wasn't a mistake. It was your shadow taking the lead. Accepting your own shadow is frightening because it means acknowledging that you are not just what you show the world. That you are not just good, rational, and balanced. Inside you, there's a dark side, full of forbidden desires, repressed emotions, and inconvenient truths. But here's the secret. The more you try to ignore it, the more power it has over you. You've spent your whole life building an identity. You learned to be strong, responsible, reliable. To please, to be polite, to hide your pain so you don't bother anyone. And then you believe this is your true self? But what if I told you that much of this identity was shaped by fear? Fear of rejection, fear of not being loved, fear of failure. You adapted to what others expected of you, not to what you really were. And when self-awareness arrives, it destroys this illusion. The shock comes when you realize your choices were guided by external impositions, that your dreams may not really be yours, that your life may have been built on expectations that were never yours. Suddenly, everything that seems solid begins to crumble. The job that gave you security no longer makes sense. The relationships that seemed unshakable show crack, and you feel like you're losing your footing. But the truth? You're not losing anything. You're waking up. And here comes the hardest part, accepting that a part of you needs to die. The self that did everything to be accepted. The self that was afraid to make mistakes. The self that settled for less than it deserved. That self wasn't you, it was armor. And now you have a choice. Keep holding on to an identity that no longer makes sense or accept the pain of becoming who you truly are. But I warn you, this process has no return. So then, after all the destruction, what's left? Nothing. Emptiness. The identity you carried was dismantled piece by piece, and now there's nothing left to hold on to. This is where most people go into despair. Without labels, without certainties, without the comfort of the old persona, what remains? The feeling of being lost, of not belonging anywhere, of looking in the mirror and not recognizing who's there. But do you know what no one tells you? This emptiness is not a punishment. It is your freedom. What you feel as loss is, in fact, space. Space where fear, lies, and conditioning once were. The problem is that at this stage, you still don't know how to fill it. This is why many people fall into anxiety, try to return to what was before, grab onto anything that brings a little security. But here's the truth. This emptiness is not meant to be filled quickly. It's meant to be explored. You've spent your life accumulating burdens that weren't yours. Now, for the first time, you have the chance to build something real. But this process is frightening, because it means that now there are no more excuses. There's no one else to blame. There's no ready-made script to follow. You can be anything, and that's terrifying for someone who has spent their life trapped in a false identity. So I ask you, will you run back to the safety of the lies you already know, or will you have the courage to stay in the emptiness until you discover what you really want to be? Everyone likes the idea of knowing themselves better, but few talk about the price of this process. Because self-awareness is not a beautiful and inspiring journey like many claim. It rips away everything that gave you security. It forces you to face that many of your relationships were based on need, that your choices were made out of fear, that much of your life was guided by lies you told yourself. And when that realization hits, there's no turning back. You can no longer pretend you don't know. And here's what no one tells you. Self-awareness comes with a high cost. You may lose friendships because you'll realize that many of them were sustained by false versions of yourself. You may lose relationships because what united you with certain people wasn't love, but need. You may lose yourself, or at least the version you believe to be. Most give up, because it's easier to go back to distractions, to comfortable routines, to the acceptance of others. But some keep going, and these few are reborn. Because when you're willing to pay the price of self-awareness, you gain something priceless: freedom. The freedom to be who you really are without needing to hide anymore. But this choice is yours. There comes a moment when there's nothing left to hold on to. The old identity has crumbled, certainties are gone, and illusions have been torn away. And now you find yourself facing what you feared most: freedom. But what no one tells you is that freedom, at first, is terrifying. Because, for the first time, you're not following a script. There are no more external expectations to guide your step. You can be whoever you want. But who are you without the fears, the excuses, the masks? This is where many get lost. Some try to rebuild what was destroyed, cling to what's left, try to go back to who they were. But the truth is that path no longer exists. You can try to fit in again, but something inside you has already changed. You no longer fit in the old boxes. You can't pretend you haven't seen what you've seen. So, the only real option left is to create something new. Not a new role, not another mask, but a version of yourself that's finally authentic. And this reconstruction doesn't happen overnight. It takes courage. It demands that you make decisions without certainty, that you trust the void before filling it, that you accept that not everyone will understand the change. But when you go through this process, something incredible happens. For the first time in your life, you're acting by choice, not by fear. And that is true freedom. Now that you know the truth, there's one choice left. Keep running or finally face yourself. Self-awareness doesn't come only with deep reflections, it demands action. Ask hard questions. If I didn't need anyone's approval, what would I do? Or what scares me about myself? Don't look for immediate answers. Just observe. Write without filters. Grab a notebook and jot down your most intimate thoughts. No censorship, no fear of what will come. Writing reveals truths you try to hide even from yourself. Be silent. Spend time alone with no distractions. The initial discomfort is part of the process. Instead of running away, face whatever comes. If you feel resistance, go deeper. Therapy, psychology books, and meditative practices help organize the inner chaos. But nothing replaces the decision to stop deceiving yourself. If you want to understand yourself more deeply and unlock your hidden potential, I invite you to explore my ebook Alchemy and Archetypes, Exploring Inner Transformation Through Jungian Psychology. In it, you'll find practical exercises that reveal the secrets of Jungian psychology and how to integrate them into your life. If you liked this content, subscribe to the channel and stay with me for the next video.